My mom married another man. She didn't invite me, her daughter, to her wedding and canceled my birthday because I'm ruining their wedding. Hey everyone, I'm 18F and I need advice. I'm feeling really lost right now, and honestly, I just don't know what to do. Some background. I'm really close to my dad. He and my mom split up when I was around 10, and I stayed mostly with him growing up because my mom was always working or busy with something else. My dad and I have a lot in common. Same sense of humor, same taste in music, and we even look alike. My mom, on the other hand, has always been a bit distant with me. I guess I've always felt like I wasn't really her favorite. Fast forward to now, my mom, 46F, is getting remarried in a couple of weeks, and I was excited about it. I love weddings, and I thought it would be nice to see her happy again after the divorce. She's marrying this guy named Brad, 50M. Brad's, well, I don't know him that well, honestly. He's kind of quiet and standoffish whenever we've been around each other. He doesn't really talk to me much, but I figured it was because we just haven't spent enough time together yet. A few days ago, I got the shock of my life. I found out from my aunt, mom's sister, that I'm not invited to the wedding. I'm literally her daughter, and I'm not invited to my own mother's wedding. When I first heard, I thought it was a joke, but when I called my mom to ask what was going on, she confirmed it was true. She told me that Brad didn't feel comfortable with me being there. I was confused and upset, so I pressed her for more details. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. Brad thinks I'm too much like my father, and he doesn't want that kind of energy at their wedding. Apparently, Brad finds it unsettling how much I remind him of my dad. He's uncomfortable because of my mannerisms, the way I talk, and even how I look. According to my mom, Brad thinks it'll be a bad vibe having me there, and he's made it clear that if I attend, he won't feel good about the day. My mom actually defended him. She said that Brad is just trying to have a peaceful and joyful day, and he shouldn't have to feel uneasy. I was speechless. Like, what? I'm too much like my dad, so I'm banned from my own mother's wedding? I tried reasoning with her, asking if she even wanted me there. I thought maybe it was just Brad, and she'd want me to come regardless. But then she admitted something even worse. She agreed with him. She told me that having me there would stir up old memories and make things awkward for everyone. My presence would remind people of the past, and that's the last thing she wants on her special day. She told me she needed to move on, and I was part of the past she was trying to leave behind. Those were her exact words. Part of the past. I couldn't believe it. I asked if this was about Dad, if maybe she still had issues with him, but she didn't really answer. She just kept saying how much Brad means to her, how this is the start of her new life, and how she needs everything to be perfect. I hung up the phone in tears. I feel so betrayed. I don't know what to do. I haven't told my dad yet. He's going to be heartbroken when he finds out. He's always been supportive of me maintaining a relationship with my mom, even when it wasn't easy. Now, I don't even know if I want to have a relationship with her anymore. How can I? She's literally choosing this guy over me. It's like I don't matter to her anymore. I'm just some reminder of a life she wants to forget. I've been crying on and off for days. Part of me wants to confront Brad and ask him what his problem is, but the other part of me feels like it's not worth it. I mean, if my mom doesn't even want me there, why would I fight for a spot in their life? But it hurts so much. I never imagined my own mother would do this to me. Has anyone been through something like this? How do you deal with being pushed out of your parents' life like this? Should I just go no contact with her and move on? I'm so lost. I ended up telling my dad everything. I was dreading it because I knew he'd be upset, but I also couldn't keep it from him. I told him about how Mom and Brad didn't want me at the wedding because I remind them of him. At first, he didn't say anything. He just sat there with this blank expression, and I could see how much it hurt him. After a few minutes, he said, "I always knew your mom had a way of cutting people out, but I didn't think she'd do it to you." That just broke me all over again. My dad looked like he wanted to cry, but he didn't. Instead, he started asking me questions, like if Mom had always felt this way about me, or if this was something new. I told him the truth, that I'd always felt like I wasn't her favorite, but I never thought it would come to this. He just nodded, but I could tell he was furious on the inside. The next day, my dad called my mom. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know it didn't go well. My dad was pacing around the house afterward, his face all red, and I overheard him saying something like, "I can't believe you do this to our daughter." He looked so angry, but when I asked him what happened, he wouldn't tell me the details. All he said was that my mom had made her choice and that it was clear she wasn't going to change her mind. Things got even weirder after that. My aunt, the same one who told me I wasn't invited, called me up and asked if I was okay. I told her I was trying to process everything, and she said something that really caught me off guard. She told me that Brad had been putting pressure on my mom for a long time to cut ties with anyone connected to my dad. Apparently, Brad is super insecure about the fact that my mom was married before, and he doesn't like being reminded of her old life. My aunt said she didn't agree with what was happening, but she also didn't want to get involved because she didn't want to ruin her relationship with my mom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just about me reminding them of my dad. Brad had been trying to erase my dad from my mom's life entirely, and my mom was going along with it. I felt sick. How could she let this guy control her like that? I knew my mom had always been kind of a people pleaser, but I didn't think she'd go this far. A few days later, I got a text from my mom. She asked if we could meet up to talk, so I agreed, hoping maybe she'd changed her mind. When we met, the first thing she said was how sorry she was that I found out the way I did. She said she didn't want to hurt me, but that Brad's feelings were really important to her, and she couldn't ignore them. I asked her why Brad felt so threatened by me, and she gave me some vague answer about how he just wants to feel secure in the relationship and how my presence made things complicated. I lost it at that point. I asked her if she even cared about me at all, or if I was just some obstacle in her new life. She got defensive and said that of course she cares about me, but I need to understand that she has to put her new relationship first. I asked her if that meant I wasn't part of her life anymore, and she just looked at me, not saying anything for what felt like forever. Finally, she said, "I don't know how to balance both." I walked out after that. I couldn't believe my own mother was willing to sacrifice our relationship just to make Brad feel better. It's like she was choosing him over me in every way possible, and I didn't matter anymore. I've been thinking a lot about what to do next. A big part of me feels like I should just cut ties with her altogether, but another part of me still wants my mom in my life, even though she's hurt me so much. It's such a painful situation, and I don't know how to move forward. All I know is that right now, it feels like I've lost my mom forever. Hey everyone, I'm back, and things have gotten even worse. I honestly don't know how much more of this I can take. I thought being excluded from my mom's wedding was bad enough, but what just happened has really pushed me over the edge. Let me start from the beginning. My dad's birthday is coming up. He's turning 50, and we had been planning a big celebration for months. My dad isn't the type to make a fuss over birthdays, but since this is a big milestone, I wanted to do something special for him. I had already gotten together with my cousins, my aunt, and even a few of his old friends from high school to plan a surprise party. We were going to rent out this nice restaurant, have a big dinner, and surprise him with a cake and all his favorite people. My dad loves simple things, so I knew he'd appreciate the thought behind it. The party was supposed to be the day after my mom's wedding. I thought that was perfect timing. I could get through the wedding, and the next day I'd be able to focus on my dad's birthday and show him how much he means to me. But of course, things couldn't go smoothly. A few days ago, I got a call from my mom. I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick up because, honestly, things have been so tense between us ever since she uninvited me from the wedding. But I figured maybe she wanted to make things right. Maybe she had a change of heart about the wedding, or at least wanted to talk about everything that's happened. Nope. She called to tell me that she and Brad had decided to move their honeymoon up by a day. I was a little confused at first, so I asked her what that meant. She explained that instead of leaving for their honeymoon the day after the wedding, they were now planning to leave the night of the wedding. I didn't really get why that mattered until she mentioned how it affected the family plans. I told her that didn't make sense since there were no family plans after the wedding as far as I knew. That's when she said, "Well, we've decided to cancel your dad's birthday celebration. It just doesn't make sense for us to be dealing with that while we're trying to focus on our honeymoon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom didn't even bother to ask about the birthday party. She didn't care about all the effort I'd put into planning it or how important this milestone is for my dad. She just casually canceled it because it was inconvenient for her and Brad. I was speechless for a moment, but then I asked her what the party had to do with their honeymoon. She said that since the wedding was the day before, The family would be too tired to attend both the wedding and the birthday party. According to her, it would be too much for everyone, and it was best to just cancel the celebration altogether. That's when I realized what was really going on. My mom didn't want any attention on my dad. She didn't want his birthday to overshadow her wedding, even though they were on different days. She wanted the entire weekend to be about her and Brad. I couldn't believe how selfish she was being. I told her that the party was important to me, and more importantly, to my dad. I said I'd already made plans, invited people, and spent time and money organizing everything. But she didn't care. She just kept saying how it was for the best and how she didn't want the family to be divided between two events. I asked her if she realized how much this would hurt Dad, and she actually had the nerve to say, "Well, he's had plenty of birthdays. This is my wedding. It only happens once." At that point, I lost it. I told her she was being incredibly selfish and that this wasn't just about her. I told her that she was ruining Dad's special day because of her obsession with making everything about her and Brad. She got defensive and started going on about how I didn't understand because I wasn't in a relationship and didn't know what it was like to plan a wedding. She said I was being childish and that I needed to grow up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was completely disregarding everything I'd said. It was like she didn't care about anyone but herself and Brad. I hung up the phone, not knowing what to do next. After that, I called my aunt, who had been helping me with the party. She was just as shocked as I was. My aunt has always been the level-headed one in the family, and even she couldn't believe what my mom was doing. She told me that she thought my mom was letting Brad influence her too much and that she'd never seen her act this selfish before. A couple of hours later, my dad called me. He sounded upset, and I knew right away that my mom had told him about canceling the party. I could hear it in his voice. He was trying to act like it didn't bother him, but I knew it did. He said something like, "I guess your mom's got her hands full with the wedding, so we'll just have to celebrate some other time." I felt my heart sink. He was so disappointed, but he was trying to hide it for my sake. I could tell he didn't want to make things harder on me, but it just made me feel even worse. I told him I was sorry, that I tried to fight for the party, but Mom had made up her mind. He told me it wasn't my fault and that he appreciated everything I'd done, but I could hear the sadness in his voice. After I got off the phone with Dad, I was even more determined to go ahead with the party. There was no way I was going to let my mom ruin this for him. I called everyone who had been invited and explained the situation. Most people were still on board to come, even though it meant they wouldn't be attending the wedding. Some of them were shocked by how selfish my mom was being, and a few even said they wouldn't go to the wedding at all because they didn't agree with what she was doing. One of the most surprising calls I got was from my uncle. He's my mom's brother, and we're not super close, but he called me out of the blue after hearing about what was going on. He told me that he wasn't going to the wedding either because he thought it was wrong for my mom to cancel the party. He said he'd known Brad for a while and didn't like how much control he seemed to have over my mom. My uncle even hinted that there was more going on with Brad than we realized, but he didn't want to get into it over the phone. That conversation left me with so many questions. What did my uncle mean about Brad? Was there something going on that I didn't know about? I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because I had to focus on making sure the party went ahead as planned. As the days went by, things got even more tense. My mom and I weren't speaking, and she was upset that some family members were choosing the birthday party over her wedding. I heard through my aunt that my mom was blaming me for causing drama and trying to sabotage her big day, which was ridiculous. All I wanted was to celebrate my dad's birthday, and somehow she turned it into a competition. The day of the wedding finally came, and I didn't attend. I spent the day with my dad, helping him get ready for his birthday party, though I didn't tell him about all the drama behind the scenes. I didn't want to ruin his day. We went to the restaurant where the party was being held, and to my surprise, almost everyone showed up, even some people who had initially said they were going to the wedding. It felt good to see how many people cared about my dad and wanted to make his day special. The party itself was amazing. My dad was genuinely surprised, and seeing the look on his face when he walked into the room full of his friends and family made all the stress worth it. We had a great time, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like things were finally going right. But then, toward the end of the night, something happened that I wasn't expecting. My mom showed up. She walked into the restaurant with Brad, still in her wedding dress. At first, I thought they were there to join the party and maybe make amends, but it quickly became clear that wasn't the case. My mom looked furious, and Brad was standing behind her with this smug look on his face. She stormed over to me and started yelling, saying that I'd ruined her wedding day by holding the party and that she couldn't believe I'd go through with it after she specifically told me not to. Everyone at the party stopped and stared as my mom made a scene. I was mortified. I tried to explain that the party had been planned for months and that it wasn't about her wedding, it was about Dad's birthday, but she wasn't having it. She accused me of trying to steal the spotlight from her and said that I was being selfish by not prioritizing her wedding over Dad's birthday. Brad didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. His smirk said it all. He was loving every minute of the chaos my mom was causing. It was clear that he'd encouraged her to come and confront me, and I felt even more disgusted by the whole situation. My dad finally stepped in and told my mom to leave. He was calm, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. He told her that this wasn't the time or place to have this argument, and that if she couldn't respect his birthday, she needed to go. My mom just glared at him and stormed out, with Brad trailing behind her. After that, the mood at the party was pretty much ruined. People tried to keep things light, but it was hard to enjoy ourselves after such a public confrontation. My dad tried to brush it off, but I knew he was hurt. I was furious at my mom for ruining what should have been a special day for him. I'm still trying to process everything that happened. I don't know if I can ever forgive my mom for how she's treated me and my dad. She chose Brad over us, over and over again, and I don't know if there's any coming back from that. After everything that went down with my mom and the whole birthday cancellation fiasco, I couldn't stay at her house anymore. The tension was unbearable, and honestly, I couldn't even look at her after she crashed Dad's party like that. So, I packed up my things and moved in with my dad. I've always been closer to him anyway, but this felt different. It wasn't just about being closer, it was about survival. I couldn't handle the emotional weight of living with someone who so clearly didn't care about me or my feelings. Moving in with my dad was a relief, but at the same time, it was painful. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with my mom. My dad tried to make things as easy as possible for me, though. He didn't ask too many questions, just helped me unpack and settle into the guest room, which was now my room for the foreseeable future. The first night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had happened. My dad's birthday party had been completely overshadowed by my mom's tantrum, and I couldn't stop feeling guilty, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. I kept thinking about how much worse things could get and what it would mean for my brothers. I have two younger brothers, James, 16M, and Ethan, 14M, and they were still living with Mom. We've always been close, but I wasn't sure how they would take sides in all of this. I hadn't even told them about the move yet. The next morning, I decided to text James and Ethan. I didn't want to drag them into the drama, but they deserved to know what was going on. I explained the situation as best I could, leaving out the ugly details about Mom's behavior at the party. I didn't want to make them hate her. I just wanted them to understand why I had to leave. James called me almost immediately after he got my text. He was furious, not at me, but at our mom. He told me that after I moved out, Mom had been on a warpath, ranting about how I had betrayed her by choosing Dad over her and how I was trying to ruin her wedding. According to James, she was acting like I was some kind of enemy. It was hard to believe she was talking about her own daughter that way, but after everything, I wasn't that surprised. James told me he was done with Mom's drama. He said he was tired of the way she always put Brad before us and how she never listened to what we wanted. He said, if she doesn't want to be a mother to you, then she doesn't deserve me and Ethan either. I was shocked to hear him talk like that. James has always been more reserved, more of a peacekeeper, but I guess even he had his breaking point. Then Ethan got on the phone. He's younger and not as outspoken as James, but I could hear the hurt in his voice. He told me he couldn't believe what was happening and that he didn't know how to deal with it. He asked if he could come stay with me and Dad too, at least for a little while, because things were so tense at home. I told him of course he could. That night, James and Ethan showed up at Dad's house with a couple of bags each. They didn't even tell Mom they were leaving. James said they just had enough and couldn't stand being in that house with her anymore. I didn't expect them to take my side so completely, but it felt good to know I wasn't alone in this. It wasn't just me who saw how messed up everything had become. Things between us siblings were tight. We had each other's backs, and that made all the difference. The three of us spent the next few days at Dad's house, just trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Dad didn't ask too many questions. He just made sure we had what we needed and let us talk when we were ready. Meanwhile, my mom was losing it. When she realized that James and Ethan had left, she started blowing up all our phones with texts and calls. She was furious, accusing me of turning my brothers against her. She said I was trying to destroy her family and that I was being spiteful because of the wedding. None of it was true, but she couldn't see that. She was too wrapped up in her own drama to even try to understand how we felt. Then things escalated. A few days after James and Ethan moved in with us, my mom showed up at Dad's house unannounced. She looked frantic, like she hadn't slept in days. Brad was with her, of course, standing behind her like a silent bodyguard. I didn't want to let her in, but Dad said we should at least hear her out. So we sat down in the living room, and she started her usual rant about how we were ruining her life. She went on and on about how we were making her look bad in front of the family, how we were being ungrateful, and how we didn't understand everything she'd sacrificed for us. It was the same tired speech she'd been giving for years, but this time it had a sharper edge. She was clearly desperate. At one point, she actually started crying, saying she didn't understand why we were all turning against her. I tried to explain to her that it wasn't about the wedding. It was about how she'd been treating us for years, putting Brad first and ignoring our feelings. I told her we needed space and that maybe she should take some time to think about how her actions were affecting us. But she didn't want to hear it. She just kept crying and saying that she couldn't believe we were choosing Dad over her. Then James spoke up. He told her flat out that she had made her choice a long time ago when she started prioritizing Brad over her own kids. He said we weren't choosing Dad over her. We were just done with the way she'd been treating us. He was calm, but firm, and I could tell it took a lot for him to say all that. My mom didn't take it well. She stopped crying and started yelling at us, accusing us of being brainwashed by Dad and saying we were all selfish brats. She even turned to Brad and said, "You see, this is what I've been dealing with for years." Brad just stood there, not saying a word, but I could see the smirk on his face. It was like he was enjoying the whole thing, watching our family fall apart. That was the last straw for me. I told my mom that if she couldn't respect our feelings and listen to what we were saying, then we were done. I said I wasn't going to let her guilt trip us anymore, and that if she couldn't accept that we needed space, then maybe we should stop talking for a while. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of the manipulation, tired of the constant drama. She stormed out after that, dragging Brad with her. As she left, she shouted something about how we'd regret this and how she hoped we were happy with Dad because we were never going to see her again. It was a horrible thing to hear from your own mother, but honestly, part of me felt relieved. At least now we didn't have to keep pretending everything was okay. For the next few days, things were quiet. My mom stopped calling and texting, and for the first time in a while, it felt like we could breathe. But then, out of nowhere, my grandma, my mom's mom, called me. She's always been kind of distant, never really involved in family stuff, but this time she wanted to talk. She said she'd heard about what happened and that she was worried about my mom. Apparently, my mom had been telling the whole family that we'd abandoned her and that we were all siding with Dad against her. My grandma was concerned because she said my mom had been acting erratically, even talking about canceling the wedding altogether. That was a shock to me. After everything, I couldn't imagine my mom canceling her precious wedding. But according to my grandma, she was really considering it because she felt like she was losing her family. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt bad, but another part of me was so angry at my mom for everything she put us through. I told my grandma that if my mom wanted to fix things, she needed to apologize and actually listen to what we were saying. But I doubted that would happen. My mom's never been the type to admit when she's wrong. A few days later, I got a message from one of my mom's friends, asking if I'd heard the news. My heart sank. I knew it couldn't be good. It turns out that my mom hadn't canceled the wedding. She moved it up. She and Brad had gotten married in a courthouse, with just a few friends and no family. I was stunned. After everything, she still went through with it, but she cut everyone out. Not even her own mother had been invited. James, Ethan, and I just sat there in shock when we found out. We couldn't believe she'd gone that far. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. She was so determined to have her way that she didn't care if it meant losing all of us in the process. Now, we're all just trying to figure out what comes next. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my mom again. Part of me hopes that maybe, someday, she'll realize what she's done and try to make things right. But another part of me knows that she's too stubborn for that. For now, I'm just focused on moving forward with my life and rebuilding the relationships that really matter, with my dad, my brothers, and the people who actually care about me. I've lost so much because of this, but at least I still have the people who matter most. After the courthouse wedding, things were quiet for a while. My mom hadn't reached out, and I didn't feel any need to either. It seemed like we had all settled into this new, fractured reality, and I was focusing on rebuilding my life with Dad and my brothers, James and Ethan. We were still hurt, still trying to process the betrayal, but at least things felt stable. That stability was shattered a few weeks later. I came home from work one afternoon to find James and Ethan sitting in the living room, looking furious. I knew something was up immediately, and when I asked them what was going on, they handed me their phones. It turns out, my mom had been texting them all day, trying to convince them to attend a wedding reception she was throwing with Brad. Apparently, they had decided to host a bigger party for friends and extended family, and my mom was desperate to have her sons there to make it look like everything was still fine between us. Her messages were dripping with guilt-tripping tactics. She kept telling them how important family was, how much it would mean to her to have them there, how they were breaking her heart by refusing to attend. She even threw in a few jabs at me, saying that I was the one keeping them away from her. It was classic manipulation. She was trying to twist the situation to make herself look like the victim, and it made my blood boil. James, ever the calm one, had already figured it out. He told me he'd responded by asking if she was planning to apologize for everything that had happened, but of course, she hadn't. Instead, she deflected, saying things like, "We all just need to move on, and you'll regret not being there when you look back one day." Ethan, who's usually quieter, was the angriest I'd ever seen him. He showed me a long text he'd sent her, telling her that he wasn't going to be used as a prop in her fake happy family photo. He told her that until she owned up to what she'd done, he wanted nothing to do with her or Brad. My heart broke for him. He's only 14, and he shouldn't have to deal with this level of emotional manipulation. But I was also proud of him for standing up to her. When my mom realized that none of us were going to fall for her tricks, she switched tactics. She stopped texting them and started calling, crying on the phone, saying things like, "I've already lost one child. Don't make me lose all of you." It was classic emotional blackmail, and while it hurt to hear her talk like that, I knew better than to fall for it. We all did. James and Ethan held firm. They told her that if she wanted a real relationship with them, she needed to fix the damage she had done, not just sweep it under the rug and pretend everything was fine. My mom didn't take it well. After their last conversation, she stopped calling them altogether. For a few days, there was radio silence from her, and I thought maybe she had finally realized that her manipulation wasn't going to work. But, of course, it wasn't that simple. The next development came from an unexpected source. One of my mom's friends, Kelly, reached out to me on social media. Kelly's always been the type to stay out of family drama, but she messaged me to warn me about something. Apparently, Brad had been bragging to their mutual friends about how he'd finally gotten rid of the baggage in my mom's life, meaning us, her actual children. Kelly was furious when she heard this, and she wanted to let me know what kind of person my mom had married. According to Kelly, Brad had been slowly but surely pushing my mom to cut ties with us for months. It wasn't just about me reminding him of my dad. It went much deeper. Brad had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and he was obsessed with making sure my mom's attention was focused on him and his kids, not us. He didn't like sharing the spotlight, and he definitely didn't like the fact that we had any kind of connection to our dad. Kelly said that Brad had been working behind the scenes to isolate my mom from us, constantly feeding her lines about how we were disrespectful, ungrateful, and toxic. My mom, being the people pleaser that she is, went along with it because she was desperate to keep Brad happy. She didn't see, or didn't want to see, that he was the one causing all the problems. Hearing all of this made me sick to my stomach. I knew Brad was a problem, but I didn't realize just how much he'd been manipulating my mom. It felt like everything was falling into place now. All of her strange behavior over the past year, the way she'd slowly started pulling away from us, it all made sense. But that didn't make it any less painful. I thanked Kelly for telling me the truth, but I didn't know what to do with the information. I couldn't exactly confront my mom about it. She'd just deny it or accuse me of trying to stir up drama. And besides, at this point, I didn't even know if I wanted to repair the relationship. A few weeks after Kelly's message, my mom decided to pay me a visit. It was out of the blue, and I wasn't prepared for it at all. She just showed up at Dad's house, where I was still living with James and Ethan. My dad wasn't home, but my brothers were, and we all exchanged confused looks when we saw her standing on the front porch. She came inside, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was here to apologize. Maybe she'd finally seen the light and was ready to make things right. But as soon as she started talking, I realized I was wrong. She sat us down and started talking about how much she missed us, how hard it had been for her without her babies in her life. She said she wanted to start fresh and move forward, but as she talked, I noticed something strange. She never actually apologized for anything. Not once did she mention the wedding, the birthday, or how she had hurt us. It was all about how she was feeling, how hard things had been for her, and how much she wanted things to go back to normal. I asked her directly if she was sorry for what had happened. I asked her if she regretted the way she had treated us, the manipulation, the lies. She hesitated for a moment, then gave a vague answer about how everyone makes mistakes and how we just need to move on. It was clear that she didn't actually care about making amends. She just wanted to patch things up enough to make herself feel better. James and Ethan saw right through it too. Ethan asked her why she was still with Brad if he was the reason for all this tension between us. She got defensive immediately, saying that Brad wasn't the problem and that we were just misunderstanding him. It was the same excuse she'd been using for months, and none of us believed it. The visit ended awkwardly. My mom left without any resolution, and I realized that she hadn't come to make things right. She had come to manipulate us into forgiving her without her having to do any of the hard work. It was infuriating, but also, it was the final piece of the puzzle for me. I finally understood that my mom wasn't going to change. Not for me, not for my brothers, not for anyone. The final straw came a few days later. One of my mom's friends posted a bunch of photos from her wedding reception on social media. I wasn't following my mom or any of her friends anymore, but someone sent me a screenshot. It was a picture of my mom and Brad, both smiling and looking happier than I'd ever seen them. My mom was glowing, laughing, and holding on to Brad like he was the center of her world. Seeing that photo made something click inside me. I realized that I had been holding on to this tiny shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, my mom would come around, that she would see what she had done, apologize, and try to fix things. But the truth was, she didn't care. She was happy with Brad, happy with the life she had chosen, even if it meant cutting us out of it. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Anger because she had chosen him over us. Sadness because I knew I had truly lost my mom. And relief because I finally felt like I could let go. I didn't have to keep trying to live up to her expectations or wait for her to come back to me. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. That night, I blocked my mom on everything: social media, phone, email. I told James and Ethan what I had done, and they both supported me completely. We had each other, and that was enough. I wasn't going to waste any more time trying to fix a relationship that was beyond saving. It hurt, of course. Cutting ties with your own mother isn't easy, and there were moments where I questioned if I was doing the right thing. But deep down, I knew it was the only way I could move forward. I wasn't going to let her or Brad control my life anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free.